Hi, Dwayne. This is the troubleshooting presentation for Melissa Victory for this week's assignment. So our scenario is that a healthcare group has recently installed a new system for electronically prescribing for patients' medications to go to pharmacies. Unfortunately, the manager, Braden Thomas, is responsible for maintaining this system. He's getting some odd messages of error messages contained within the system, and he's trying to figure out how to resolve these problems. And he really doesn't have the necessary tools he needs to do this effectively. He also doesn't know who to contact about this because he only has the sales rep's information, and that person is always going to voicemail, so he can't actually get that person on the phone to help him. So he starts following the troubleshooting process. There are 4 steps in that process. It's really important that he understand these troubleshooting steps in order to assist him in decoding the errors and to hopefully resolve them in a timely fashion. Going through these steps will help him do a step-by-step process to evaluate the errors and follow a logical course to resolve them. So step 1 is to find the error messages, which he has done. He's gotten 3 different error messages, and now he needs to discover why these messages are being triggered. Step 2 is to find the possible causes of the errors and try to do some research or use experience from prior situations to help determine what the errors are. So the first error is an O7 incorrect script error. This could be an error that comes back when the provider field is entered incorrectly. The second error is a PPROC error when it says Schedule 1 not allowed. This is a processing error where the provider is either not allowed to prescribe Schedule 1 drugs, or Schedule 1 drugs are disallowed to be e-prescribed, meaning they have to be prescribed on an actual piece of paper, or the patient's insurance does not allow Schedule 1 drugs. Schedule 1 drugs are things like heroin, LSD, and marijuana. In some states, marijuana is actually allowed to be prescribed. The third and final error is another PPROC error, which is not in the formulary. That's another processing error where either the drugs are not entered into the formulary, the patient's insurance doesn't allow Schedule 1 drugs, or the formulary was updated recently and now Schedule 1 drugs are not allowed. So step 3 is to collect additional data and try to determine through a process of elimination what the cause of the problem is. So in the first error, that incorrect script error, it turned out that the provider field was entered incorrectly and the provider's last name was misspelled. The second PPROC error, the Schedule 1 not allowed, it turned out that the provider needed to prescribe something other than a Schedule 1 drug. Also, if the provider wished to still prescribe a Schedule 1 drug, they would have to provide the pharmacy with a paper prescription. Again, this is state specific. Here in Maine, you're not allowed to prescribe Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 over e-prescribing. Those have to be submitted on a paper script. The third possibility is that the patient's insurance doesn't allow Schedule 1 drugs, so that would mean that the prescriber would need to prescribe some other class of drug, or the patient would have the option to pay for the Schedule 1 out of their pocket. The third and final error, the PPROC error, not in formulary. Again, the provider can either prescribe some other drug that is allowed, or the patient can pay out of pocket, or it's a deactivated medication in the pharmacy's formulary, which means they no longer fill that prescription for that medication and the provider must prescribe a different type of drug. Step 4 is to test the solution to ensure that it has been solved correctly. So Braden goes over the information and notes that the provider's last name was misspelled. So he corrects that misspelling and the error gets resolved. With the second one, the Schedule 1 not allowed, it is determined that the Schedule 1 drugs are not allowed to be e-prescribed. So the provider opts to prescribe a different class of drug so that he could not have to handwrite the prescription. Handwriting a prescription is always a possibility for the patient to alter that script, which I think is why the e-prescribing has become so popular. The final error message, the not in formulary, it is determined that Schedule 1 drugs are deactivated medications and cannot be filled by the pharmacy. And so the provider chooses to prescribe a different drug that is contained within the formulary of the pharmacy. Some other options that Braden could use to help him resolve these errors are to search on the vendor's site for support information. Sometimes the vendors have a FAQ section where you could go on to look and evaluate error messages that other people have received and see if someone else has received that same message and if there is some guidance from the vendor as to how to resolve that error. He could call the vendor's customer support line and ask for assistance. In our software, our EMR software at the dental school, we have actually a help line across the top, and if we hit that line, we open up a ticket, and the ticket goes directly to the IT support for our EMR software. And usually we're pretty quick on getting a response. There's ways for us to let them know that our system is down or that we're unable to use it, and that speeds up the response time from the support team. He could also post a question to a listserv for the software to see if other people have encountered similar error messages and if they have some advice for him. We also have a listserv line for our vendor software that frequently posters can mention that they're having trouble and give their workarounds for the error messages. It kind of puts it out there to a lot of different people who also use the same software. If the doctors expect him to be able to solve these problems on his own, he should probably request some additional training from the vendor. It seems as though he needs more training to be able to resolve error messages as they come up, and this would be an important piece for his job. The other possibility he could do is to escalate the problem to the IT staff. If there is IT staff within their group, I would imagine that most larger healthcare groups have to employ at least one IT person since they're so heavily computerized, and there's likely to be other issues that would need to be resolved by IT staff as well. That's my final reference. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this, and I hope it meets satisfaction. Thank you.